In this video, we're talking all about that $60 billion announcement for the Disney parks just dropped the other day. We're going to talk about it, analyze it, speculate, break it down. First time on the channel, Slimer is joining us today to join in on the conversation. We're talking about the billion-dollar investment.
Give me the drop, some money, dropping on my money.
Welcome aboard, everybody, to another episode of OG 55. We are talking all about that $60 billion investment. Now, before we dive into the festivities, I want to introduce first time on the channel, but longtime friend of the channel, Slimer. Welcome, brother.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
It's great having you, Slimer. If you could let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Well, you won't find me on social media. I don't have any social media except for my Facebook, and that's where my friends find me. But I'll be on the OG 55 channel in the future, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can check Slimer out in the live chat. A lot of times he's chilling with us with our live shows and our premieres and everything. So say hi to Slimer in the live chat. Absolutely. And again, Slimer, thank you so much, brother, for coming on and talking shop.
Thanks for having me on, brother.
Absolutely. And we got Citrus George over here, my fellow Italiano. Welcome back, brother.
Thanks for having me back on, and I can't wait. I couldn't wait for this show because just the topic is just so meaty and juicy, and then to have our good buddy on for the first time, it just makes it all that more sweeter. You know, it's Italiano. Forget about it.
Absolutely, George. If you can let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media.
Absolutely. If you want to find me, you can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on the podcast, A Walk with Walt. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
Absolutely. Here we go. I'll chime you in, and I'll chime Slimer in. And now we are official. Okay, so let's dive into this announcement. This is crazy stuff here. Okay, so it says here, this is from the Hollywood Reporter, Disney plans a $60 billion expansion of the theme parks. In a presentation to investors, the company says it plans to, quote, explore even more characters and franchises, including some that haven't been leveraged extensively to date at its parks around the world. It goes on to say, in a dramatic expansion of its theme parks, products, and cruise line business, Disney says that it will spend $60 billion over the next 10 years to turbocharge growth in the lucrative division. Now, I do want to say, before we get started here, we are unsure if this is, if that $17 billion that Iger mentioned back in May, if that's included in the $60 billion figure, or if that $17 billion will be added to the $60 billion. Hollywood Reporter said it's not immediately clear what that situation is. Now, I'll start with you, Slimer. What are your thoughts, like out the gate, what are your thoughts on the $60 billion announcement for the Parks and Resorts segment?
Hey, look, they got to make the investors happy. They got to get them excited about the business strategy going forward. And right now, let's face it, the investors aren't. They're not too confident in the Disney company, so they had to give them a dog and pony show, and I think that's exactly what this was. I mean, if you look at the fact that they said they were going to double their investments without actually factoring in, the inflation of the dollar since 2013. So if you go back to 2013 and you compare the value of a dollar from then until now, you're looking at a 38.1% increase in inflation, dollar for dollar. So you're looking at about $9.5 billion in inflation added to that initial $30 billion investment. So really, you're looking at about a $20 billion increase at the maximum once you factor in inflation. And even if you were to take an average or a mean of the inflation over the last 10 years, you're looking at about $23 billion versus a $30 billion difference. So they're not really doubling the amount of money that they're investing into DPEP. At the most, you're looking at about $23 billion. In order for them to actually double, once you factor in inflation, you really be looking at about an $80 billion increase in investment. And that's if they allocated the money this year. Obviously, they're going to be dictated as how that capex is going to be distributed year over year, so that way the profitability looks maximized. But this was a dog and pony show. Did the investors fall for it? I don't think they did, but a couple money outlets seem to have ran with it, and usually those are the ones that have the 1 minute, 2 minute quibits on it, and it's like gone. This is what's happening, and then I would say don't listen to those guys.
well, and it's interesting, Slimer, that you mentioned about like the investors. It was kind of like interesting how like once they announced this, the stock went down like $3. I mean, it was a significant drop after this announcement. So, however the investors are interpreting it, they're not exactly super positive. Now, I don't know if that's because they see Disney pumping in so much money into the parks, and investors want Disney to cut back and get leaner. I think that might be some element of that. But I thought that was very interesting how much the stock went down on this announcement. Very, very surprising.
Well, I don't know if you guys noticed, but the market as a whole had a bad day. So I don't know how much of that was attributed to actual investor confidence or just the market having a bad day. So if we can get some details on that, I would really like to know, because a lot of people are writing on the fact that, well, that's exactly why it happened. But I don't know. I'm a little skeptical. I need to see some more information about that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And that's important Slimer, in these conversations that we have about Disney, and especially that stock price, is context matters. I see a lot of screenshots, a lot of like, on Twitter, we're like, oh, Disney went down today. But you're right. What about the rest of the market? Is it something that's maybe affecting the entire industry, which is bringing all the media stocks down? If you just look at Disney that went down, it's hard to decipher whether it's a Disney issue necessarily, or an overall stock market issue, or a Hollywood issue. Fantastic point, Slimer. What do you think, George? This initial $60 billion expansion announcement from the Walt Disney Company, this SEC filing, what do you make of it? Where are you at with it?
I mean, I'm very much I'm skeptic, I don't know like exactly which way to take it at the moment. I'm kind of like on the middle ground. Of course, we're not talking about Star Wars, otherwise I'd be on the high ground. But I'm very optimistic, and I was telling Slimer before we started recording that when you kind of put all the puzzle pieces together, of almost like they're kind of giving us these hidden Easter eggs, which Disney loves to do. It's like a buildup of anticipation where we're getting news out of Destination D23 of these smaller type of projects that are going forward, which I'm completely okay with. Destination D23 was never something that gave off big announcements. So of what we got from it, I'm actually satisfied with. The notion of the 17,000 page environmental packet for Disneyland Forward, the whole notion of the D23 event, formerly known as the Expo, they're going to hold in the Honda Center. And I said it before on the show, and I'm going to say it again. You're going to put 20,000 Disney fans together in one stadium type structure. And Tomorrow's going to come out on the stage and just give us another set of what ifs. I guarantee you, I think the third time is going to be there's going to be bloodshed, because you do not want to do that with figuratively speaking. Yeah.
Okay,
yes. Figuratively speaking, that you are going to have 20,000 pissed off diehard Disney fans if we keep on getting these what ifs. But I think hopefully, again, I'm optimistic that all these what ifs are going to lead up to the bigger picture. And I feel like that if they are going to invest $60 billion, it's very telling. It's very telling of the direction of the mindset that they want to go. Just Tomorrow has to get out of this funk that he's in about making these announcements and not doing anything about it. It's like you're showing us this Thanksgiving turkey, but then you're pulling the tray back. It's like, I don't want to look at it. I want to eat it.
Right. Well, this is what you could have for dinner, but we don't know yet, basically.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think I've seen a lot of videos on this topic and everything. I think one thing that a lot of people are kind of missing in this whole announcement they're kind of focusing on 60 billion in 10 years, right? So I see in a lot of content about like, okay, so it's 60 billion, 10 years. So that's 6 billion each year and yada, yada, yada. But that's not really how Disney has historically allocated money in terms of like in expansions and what have you. Disney typically, it's kind of like an ebb and flow kind of thing, right? So maybe for 2 years, they'll focus on Disneyland Resort. They'll pull back on Disneyland Resort and they'll focus on Florida. They'll pull back on Florida, they'll focus on Paris. And that's typically how it works. So I don't think that 10 years is going to be evenly spread out like that. It's not really how it works. So I think the allocation of the funds, I think, is more important really than even the number. I think that, look, I'll give an example, right? This is kind of a crude example, but I think it's the best I can do right now. If I'm going to say I'm going to spend $1,000 at the strip club this week, right? Well, okay, it matters how many days of the week that I go. So if I only go 1 day a week, well, $1,000, man, I'm living large, right? $1,000 1 day. That's a different experience than say if I go 3 days that week or 7 days that week, right? So how you allocate that same amount of money over that time period matters. So look, if they go in there and they don't necessarily invest so much in the Chinese parks because they just spent a bunch of money on the Chinese parks with Zootopia and Frozen, and it focuses more on Disneyland and maybe a couple of the resorts. That's going to feel different than if they spent it all on every single resort. So I think we have to be aware of how they allocate it. I think that's a big, for me, that's what's really going to make or break it is how they allocate it, because I don't think every resort is going to get a bunch of stuff. I think they're going to be very strategic with where this money goes. And look, let's be honest, 60 billion, even when you cut out the cruise lines, even when you cut out the operational costs and what have you, that's a lot of money. Pandora back in like 2016 was, I think, like a $500 million investment. So now, like you said, Slimer, with the inflation, maybe it's 700 million. I mean, you can build a few Pandoras at Walt Disney World if you were to allocate some of these funds over to Walt Disney World, and very easily do so. So I think it's enough money. I just think that really, for me, I think that I want to see how they're going to allocate this money. And I think that if they can do it effectively and put it in the right places, I think we're cooking with some gas here. But what do you think, Slimer? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of the expansion that they wanted to have complete by 2025, the budgets have already been allocated. And it's just a matter of them spending the CapEx appropriately and timely in a way that shows good profit margins at the end of the year in terms of operating expenses. Think about it. You already have Frozen Land in Hong Kong opening November 20th. Disneyland Paris, you have the production center that's getting updated, and that's going to open up in 23, 24. The update to Toon Studios in Disneyland Paris, that's going to be updated and ready to go by the end of this year, next year. Frozen Land, Disneyland Paris, another 2025 opening. You have a Tangle Flat Ride coming to Disneyland Paris. That's one of those small announcements that I would have expected to see at D23, because that's something that people are getting excited about. More Tangled in the parks. You have the new Fantastic Springs coming to Disney Tokyo.
Yeah,
it's coming to a Disney park. Is the Disney company paying for it? Absolutely not. But let's look at what that includes. You're talking about a new hotel. You're talking about a Frozen World. You're talking about a mini Tangled and a mini Peter Pan land. So let's not discount the investments that are going to parks that Disney are not paying for, because at the end of the day, those are all coming to the park experience on at least a global level. Where is that money going to go? Well, I hope that it's going to be spent appropriately, because we both know that Disney has allocated CapEx very intelligently, and sometimes they've dropped the ball. But one thing I do hope happens is I hope that money is managed a little bit better. Like take Luminous, for example. Okay. As Mickey View says, at the 11th hour, the C-suite decided they didn't like it. 70% of it has to get cut and rewritten. Okay. Really? At the 11th hour?
Yeah, that's crazy. We talked about that a little bit yesterday, George, or the day before yesterday. Mm-hmm. And it was like, 70% of the music they didn't like it, right? And so it's like, look, it's one of those things where like, okay, it's kind of like the Lucasfilm thing, right? I respect the fact that Kathleen Kennedy can go in and make the call. Hey, this isn't working. we got to cut bait. Okay, I can respect that, but at the same time, it's like you wait until the very end to do that. Like with Solo, right? The Solo, a Star Wars story. So it's the same thing here with this music. It's like, okay, I respect the fact that you're cutting it and fixing the issue, but this should have been kind of caught a little earlier, you know? And you're absolutely right, Slimer. I think that they've been real hit or miss with these investments. Some really work, some really don't. Like the Toontown remodel and Runaway Railway over at Disneyland, I think was a good investment. I've seen a lot of traffic in that area now because of that. I think that was a good investment. But then you have something like Harmonious over there at Epcot with the barges that they were just basically just flushed money down the toilet with that whole thing. So it's been real hit or miss. So yeah, we'll see how this pans out. Because I think that Disney needs to really kind of get smart. Take a breath, really look at what you're doing, and kind of invest in a smarter way. They were doing that for a long time. When they redid DCA for that, the $1 billion redo, and they added Cars Land, World of Color. It seemed like they really understood the audience and they understood the product. And for some reason, they kind of lost that a little bit along the way, and they got to get back on that ball because I tell you, it can get expensive. You have to backtrack and redo things.
Yeah, well, WDI has new leadership, so hopefully that'll change under new management.
Yeah, that's true. They brought back Mr. Bruce Vaughn, so we'll see. What do you think, George?
Yeah, I think, as I said, I'm very optimistic, and I think with Bruce Vaughn back on board, I think he's gonna nip some butt. I think he's gonna nip them in the butt because, just my opinion, he didn't seem too thrilled. In a sense, like his body language and everything at the Destination D23. If you go back, it's like he was making these announcements, but it was like, okay, I gotta like come in and tweak and fix some stuff because this is like what the hell did I leave and come back to? Sort of thing. So I don't know if you guys noticed that, but he didn't seem too happy. Like he put on like a show, but I think in his mind he was not too thrilled about it.
What without your impression too, Slimer, with the body language, the energy?
Yeah, he was a very docile Imagineer. Usually Imagineers are very excited. They're really happy about what Imagineering is doing. I've never seen an Imagineer just go, yep, and we're gonna come out with this. They're really excited about the fact that they're able to, bring their craft to the table. They're usually pretty proud of their craft. Now, let me ask you this, guys. I was talking to a really good friend of mine, Bo, and we're both, he and I, we're big Disney World fans. We have annual passes. We go at least once a month. And we like the idea of the Indiana Jones land that they're going to bring. I'm actually on board with that idea, but they have to do the Tokyo Disney Indiana Jones. It has to fit in with that very, jungle overridden ancient temple style looking aesthetic. I think they can make it work, but there are a lot of valid points. It's a 30-year-old ride. They could take the old track, but we're looking at an IP that really didn't do too well at the box office. But Josh Damar said something which I haven't heard yet, and maybe you guys have, but a Wakanda land.
Very interesting. Okay, so to touch upon your Indiana Jones question, it's interesting that they're going with that IP, right? Because a lot of people on like Twitter and stuff have been saying like, well, what does Indiana Jones have to do with animals? And that's a fair question. I completely see where they're coming from. However, what I think I think the approach with Indy is the approach they took with Expedition Everest, right? So with Expedition Everest, it was more about the locale. It was more about in Asia. More about that than it was about animals. There's really no animals. The Yeti, I guess, but you're right. There's really nothing there. Animals. I think with Indy, I think it's the same kind of idea. I think they're doing this whole South America thing, and Indy will fit comfortably in that environment. It'll be a very, like you said, very lush, overgrown jungle kind of environment. Feel very South American, and that's how they're going to tie it in, right?
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
As far as I'm not disappointed in it if they make it. I'd still check it out. I think the overall aesthetics of the land itself will fit nicely into Animal Kingdom. I think anything would look good right now than Dino Land USA. That thing is atrocious. Unfortunately, because dinosaurs had potential, because I don't want our buddy Showcase to send me a like a letter saying how dare you, my dinos. But which actually a good friend of the channel who we had on a couple days ago, Candid Camper, also made a good point that if you were to infuse the dinosaurs with Indiana Jones, because he's already like an archaeologist, you have the
Right.
boneyard, and based off of the recent film where he goes back in time, what if he goes back in time to the dinosaurs? And then as I was thinking about it, I thought, well, they already have and if Disney, if you're listening and you do that, please update the dinos. They need some heavy work. But if they had the Carnotaurus coming at the vehicle, just as it is in the ride, but you would have Indiana Jones hanging down off of like a vine or something, so it looks like the dino's coming for him. But then we go back to the present time. And it's like, and then we see him at the end. It was like, that's a close call or something, like he'll give like his like one-liners. But overall, I think Indiana Jones, as far as like the land itself, I think would look nicely. I like the overall notion of having South America as part of Animal Kingdom. And I don't know if you heard my idea, Slimer, either it was on like the show or what have you, but I thought that if they were going to do something with South America, I thought it would be kind of cool if they did Paradise Falls, like with Up, because they already have the characters intertwined in the park. They have Kevin walking around, you have the meet and greet, you have with Doug and Russell with the Wilderness Explorers, so it speaks to the conservation side of it, aside from still keeping Indiana Jones. But I mean, I would have done Up over Encanto.
And George, I think that'd probably be a more pragmatic budget as well. I mean, if they're looking to introduce something new, I don't think they'd be looking at $1 billion for a land for something like that. If they budgeted right, they could do $500 million and save themselves a lot of money.
And I think too, as also touching upon the $17 billion that Iger promised for Walt Disney World, even if that was part of the $60 billion, and you were to take that out, and it's like, okay, because Jack from DSNY Newscast made that point. Well, then it would be $43 billion, which would be true. But even if that was the case, it's still money that's going towards Walt Disney World. So it's like, no matter how you slice it, you're still getting a piece of the pie.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, exactly. And I agree with you on that, George. I mean, like, okay, so let's say the 17 is part of the 60. Okay, but that's still 17 going towards Walt Disney World. So I can do the same with everything. I can be, well, if you take out the Disneyland portion, you take out this portion and take out that portion, you're left with nothing. Well, of course, you're taking everything out. But like, yeah, it's still money towards Disney World. So, I mean, and 17 billion is nothing to sneeze at. It's absolutely nothing to sneeze at. I mean, look, this is the overall 60 billion, right? That's a huge chunk of change. And when you factor in the operational costs and all that stuff and the cruise lines and all that stuff, it's still a lot of money, And that's why I keep going back to, it's the allocation that's really going to matter. And Slimer, you brought up a great point. It's a lot of times Disney has mismanaged money, right? So if they can do it where they can allocate it effectively and smartly, I think this could be a huge win for Disney parks. It's just about how they're going to handle it. It's all about that execution. It's all about that allocation at the end of the day. It's a lot of money. You can do a lot with it, but how are you going to manage that money? Because Disney has historically overspent for things. They have, and this has been a huge issue for Walt Disney Imagineering for a very, very long time. They overspend on a lot, and more than they have to, And so I'm more worried about that. But I will say this though, if we look at the whole chessboard, right? I think Disneyland Resort is kind of positioned in a really good spot right now because Disney's not wasting their time and kind of going through all this political process and what have you with Anaheim to not spend money, right? With Disneyland Forward, I think that whatever we can say, wherever we can kind of speculate where this money is going to go, I'm the most certain with Disneyland Resort just because of that Disneyland Forward thing and how much political capital they're kind of spending and energy they're spending into that. You don't do that if you're not planning on spending money. So I think Disneyland is pretty. I think they're in it in that 10-year period. The other parks, Florida too, to be honest. Look, we've seen a lot of blue sky stuff coming from Daddy Josh. The Beyond Big Thunder stuff and all that. And I know fans get frustrated that it's very vague, and I'm frustrated. We all are. but the fact that he's trotting that stuff out shows that there is an interest in Florida and that property, and they are bouncing ideas off each other. And that Wakanda thing that you mentioned, Slimer. Now, okay, maybe Slimer, with Islands of Adventure, is there anything? Because I know that they can't, because the whole Marvel thing over there, right? Is Black Panther mentioned at all in that land? Is Disney able to build a Wakanda land over there in Florida? Do we know? Or
yes, and the reason is because Marvel is actually so Disney cannot. Universal. Let me phrase it in a way that makes sense, because the contract between Universal Studios and Marvel and now Disney is a little complicated, but Universal Studios has an agreement with Marvel and now the Disney company that states that they cannot make any Marvel-like characters look a certain way past the Mississippi River. I believe it's west of the Mississippi River. Right. They can't look a specific way, which is why when you go to Islands of Adventure, the Marvel characters look like they do in their comic book form. And that's by legal agreement. That's by an agreement they have with the Disney company. Now, Black Panther, no, he does not exist there in any form unless he's in a comic book. And that's that's going to be in the fine print with the agreement that they have with Marvel, whether they're allowed to sell Black Panther there or not. Now, even if they are over there, I really don't think that it matters, because it's not going to be the Disney Black Panther. You're going to find the Marvel Comics Black Panther, which is completely different. I know it doesn't sound like it makes sense, but that's just the way it is. There's an actual comic book store in Islands of Adventure that sells Marvel comics, but none of them have the Disney likeness.
Now, I could be wrong, but I thought the contract said that any of the characters that are currently in Universal cannot be used in a Disney park east of the Mississippi River. So, being that they have the X-Men, Spider-Man,
that's right. I got it in the wrong direction. It's east, not west.
Yeah, is that okay? I just wanted to make sure, but I think that was part of that because that they're in the parks of Universal currently. Whatever characters are in, Disney cannot use at Walt Disney World. Now, I do believe, and I could be wrong, when I was there, I don't recall seeing anything of Black Panther. I don't remember seeing him as a meet and greet. I don't remember seeing him in the merchandise or anything. So I think, and that's why Disney World was able to use Guardians, because there's nothing in Universal of Guardians. So I think Black Panther and Wakanda, I think, is a safe bet for Walt Disney World. Now, one can argue too of saying, if you put it in Animal Kingdom, how does that, work up? But if you actually look at Avatar blends in technology mixed with the organic notion of nature. And I feel like that's where Black Panther is. They use technology in their world, but it's covered with their lush landscape and with nature and being one with the land and what have you. And I feel like that is where the connection would be with Animal Kingdom if they were to put it in Walt Disney World.
Can I ask you something, OG? And George, this question is for you too. But they had also mentioned that there are 700 million untapped Disney fans. 700 million untapped Disney fans that are not currently going to the parks. 1 in 10 are not going to the Disney parks, they say. And I don't know if you guys saw that slide.
I did see that.
I did see that.
And I was scratching my head at that because I'm thinking, like, that's a bold statement to even come out and admit that.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that I guess they're trying to reach a bigger audience, to come to the parks or what have you. But I think it may not necessarily be of what they're actually putting into the parks. I feel like, just right now in today's day and age, with the prices of everything going up and the inflation and what have you, I just think people are kind of putting different priorities ahead of, how much you could spend on a vacation.
Well, and I also think that what comes into play there is where people are located. I don't really know the details of that whole study that they did, but if you live in Montana and you're a Disney fan, well, it's a lot harder to get to a Disney park than if you lived in Southern California. So that's the thing. It's like, I don't really know. That was interesting. I did see that, Slimer. It was interesting. it just seems like there's a lot of factors involved in that, which like sometimes are kind of beyond people's control, right? Like, so if you're far from a Disney park, because Disney parks are not really like local regional stuff. Like if you're like a Six Flags fan, anywhere you live, you're going to find one of those parks close to you, you know? Disney is a little harder. So I don't know if there's like physical constraints for people getting to the Disney parks or if there's something else going on there. But I mean, it was interesting though, that they actually did reference that. And they actually, I mean, it was implied, heavily implied, that these people are convincible at least, right? Like they're trying to sell these people on coming into Disney parks. So that's interesting. So I'm very curious. I would love to see the survey results on that. Right? Like what's keeping these people from going? Is it Genie Plus? Is it the pricing? Is it the ticketing? What is it? Reservations? What is it? Very, very interesting point, Slimer.
Right. And how does it factor into how they're going to spend that $60 billion? Because if the limitations are economic and locality, well, they still have to come up with ideas that they're going to put in the park that's going to drive people to go there. If it's specific demographics, whether it's race, whether it's economic status, what's going to get those people into those parks? And they're going to look at IPs, they're going to look at ideas that they can put in there that's going to tap into that $700 million, because that's not $700 million, but 700 million people, because that's untapped revenue. And I mean, that's how I would see it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And in that graphic, you saw that the Chinese potential was the biggest, so that's interesting. Yeah. Are they hinting that they're going to invest more so over there? And keep in mind too, audience at home, investing in the Chinese parks is a lot easier for Disney than it is out here in a lot of ways, at least financially, because they don't fit the entire bill. So when they do a Zootopia or they do a Frozen in Hong Kong, they're splitting that. They're not paying the whole shebang. Whereas if they do something out here in California, it's Disney writes the whole check, So we also have to keep that in mind too. But I'm very curious. Yeah, you're right. How is that going to affect the allocation process? Where is that money going to go with these untapped Disney fans? Where do they see the most growth potential? And does that mean China? Does that mean Anaheim? Does that mean Florida? I mean, it's interesting to see where that is. I'm very curious about that.
Now, in that report that they were giving, like about the 60 billion and what have you, there was a graph chart, I believe. Braden from Mickey Views brought it up, and it gave like a 10-year span of what Disney had spent within the last 10 years that led up to now. And if you actually look at everything, I mean, there was a Toy Story Land, there was Pandora, there was Galaxy's Edge ×2. There was other things, that was played into it with the Disney Cruise Line and what have you. But if you look at that as a 10-year span of what they just did in the last 10 years, that was still a lot. Because a lot of times when people look at that graph and they say, okay, well, they're conning of how many projects. Right. Well, if you count Toy Story Land, there's multiple attractions in Toy Story Land. If you count Pandora, there's multiple attractions in Pandora. If you count Galaxy's Edge, I mean, for what it's worth, you have 2 attractions. Well, I mean, one's more relevant than the other, but there's still 2 attractions. So when you add everything together, it's still a lengthy amount of money that you can span through to the next 10 years.
Yeah, I don't think fans really Disney fans are really hard on Disney, and they always have been, and that's fine. But like, I do see your point, George, where it's like, it feels like we're starving, we're in a huge drought, but the last few years have been decent. It hasn't been like nothing, I mean, and we're currently right now in a major expansion for Epcot, or not expansion, I shouldn't say expansion, but like renovation, I guess you can call it, with stuff like that. And there's things going on, and has been going on. So that's interesting. That's very, very interesting.
And we also have to take into consideration, it's been 3 years, which is, to me, I'm sorry, it's still fresh. Right. When we had a worldwide shutdown. Everything closed down and was just on a complete standstill. You can't just discount Disney as being the only company that is going through struggle right now. With that amount of time, and you think, oh, Disney World's only been closed for a few months. Disneyland closed much longer. Disney Cruise Line closed even longer than that. But you have to think of how much revenue Disney brings in a day with those parks. When you times
Yep.
that by the amount of days that they were closed, that's
Right.
going to take a lot of time to get back up on your feet to maneuver. And you have to think all the layoffs of the cast members that Disney has done with even Imagineering, all the original Imagineers, and they had to bring different people back on. So there could have been projects that were already kind of in limbo, not knowing what was going to happen in 2020. Those Imagineers got let go. You bring in new Imagineers that are seeing like all projects that were in limbo, maybe starting over. So it takes a good oil and tune up to try to get back on track based off of the fiasco that we went 3 years ago.
Well, yeah, and I
Yeah,
think with Epic Universe, I think with Universal, I think they were kind of lucky in the sense that that huge project was not sort of, but was started and in the process before the global shutdown. So that train was already like full steam ahead, basically, right? So I think that really helped them because it was like Disney didn't really have a huge project like that already in the works prior to the pandy, right? So it's like now it's after pandy, and there's like you said, George, there's a lot of damage, collateral damage from the pandy. So now it's a lot harder to pick up those pieces and do a big, large scale project. So I do think that Universal definitely lucked out with that, where they were able to get that started prior to the pandy and get that ball rolling and just kind of truck through it. Where Disney now, it's post pandy. And there's a lot of damage, and Disney has a lot more theme park stuff than Universal, so they did take a bigger hit. So now it's trying to pick up those pieces and sort of rebuild. But what do you think, Slimer? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I want to point out some numbers in Disney's favor. These were actually brought up in the investor meeting the other day. But Bob Iger had mentioned that if they even maintain the same trajectory over the next 10 years, you're still going to see a three times multiplier on a return on investment capital and a 4 times multiplier on operating income. And don't forget that since 2019, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the increase in revenue per guest has increased 48%. Wow. I mean, so really all they have to do is just maintain the trajectory that they've established over the last 10 years. And mind you, that was during COVID. So
wow,
they really don't have to work that hard to maintain that trajectory. And that trajectory made investors very happy, as we know. And we know the investors are the happiest when they're spending money in the parks. So, do they have to go crazy and meet everybody's, every Disney fans' delight when it comes to all these ideas? Everybody wants to have their cake and eat it too. But like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, guys, we have a new Space Mountain and Fantasy Springs coming to Disney Tokyo. Disneyland Paris has 2 new restaurants. It's going to have 2 revamped lands. It's going to have a Frozen land. Okay, they're going to have a new hotel, a revamped hotel. And then we know that Disneyland Florida idea it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time, and we just have to be patient.
Yeah. Oh, Disneyland Forward is happening. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have so much momentum behind that now, and they did that economic or environmental impact report with it. It seems like that, and Disney's really handling it correctly this time. Like, when they were trying to get that Eastern Gateway project kind of built and off the ground, Disney was much more combative with the local businesses and the residents, right? This time around, trying to get Disneyland Forward approved, Disneyland is in a much more collaborative kind of mode, right? They're doing these little pop-up coffee things and trying to get the community involved. They're being very respectful with the local businesses, trying to work with them more. I think they've handled it way better than they did the Eastern Gateway thing a few years ago. So I would be very surprised. You even had Governor Gavin Newsom, the head Democrat in the whole state, basically endorsing the whole thing recently when he did all the photo ops with Bob Iger over there. I mean, it's going to happen. So, and that's why I think this $60 billion. I think a chunk of that, a good chunk of it, will go to that Disneyland project. I'm going to
say the majority, OG.
Really? That's bold, but Slime. You think the majority?
Yeah, it's going.
I think majority, if not half. I mean, look, the money they've got allocated for the cruises. You're looking at about $5 billion.
Right.
Okay, so you have Walt Disney World. What do they have coming up? Harmonious Test Track, Zootopia, and that new land in Animal Kingdom is going to happen. That's going to happen within the next 10 years. On the low end, you're looking at about $2 billion. High end, you're looking at about $3 to $4 billion to make that happen. So now you're looking at about $7 billion right there. Okay. Disneyland Forward is going to cost the most. So if they're going to if they're going to make any budget cuts, it's not going to be to Disneyland Forward. It's going to be to Walt Disney World, which has received so much investment over the last 10 years. And it's going to be to one of the internet. Well, it's not going to be at any of the national parks because they've already invested the majority of that. All those are opening, all those new additions, all those new restaurants, rides, they're all going to be open by 2025.
I could definitely agree with you on that because as we were talking before the show with the Disney Cruise Line, the Treasure is already in construction as we speak. The Wish is already up and running. You have a ship that's going to be sailing out of Singapore that was already bought and paid for. They're just Disneyfying it. And then you have the third Triton class ship, which I think after that, Disney's going to take a little hiatus of adding any more ships to the fleet. They're going to want to get their revenue back from how much that they spent on those. So I think if any money gets put into the Disney Cruise Line, I think it's just going to be to enhance the past ships, like maybe like with the Magic or the Wonder, or the Dream, what have you. The most I think that's going to come out of out of Walt Disney World is going to be like the smaller projects that you had mentioned, Slimer, like with the Country Bear Jamboree, Test Track, Luminous, and then the bigger portion of that is going to go for the Animal Kingdom revamp of Dino Land, and then the Beyond Big Thunder. I feel like that's going to be the biggest chunk. But I do agree with you with Disneyland Forward, because if the rumors are true, if they're going to add like a type of people mover or a type of transportation, that's going to lead guests back and forth to the parks, they're going to have to add in a new parking structure. They're going to have to relocate everything, and I think, I feel like the biggest chunk for Disneyland Forward is going to be the obviously to add more stuff to an expansion, but I feel like the biggest chunk is going to be to relocate everything and kind of maneuver it all around between Harbor and Catella and what have you.
Well, and here's the thing too, is I think Disney is looking at what they're doing over at Universal Orlando as kind of like a measuring barometer for what they can do here in Disneyland Resort. And why I say that is because it's a very similar situation, minus Volcano Bay, which is a water park, but Universal will be a 3-park resort, right? And I think Disney's looking at that going, okay, so what's the potential here with a 3-park resort? They're kind of sitting back and watching this because Universal obviously feels like there's a lot of growth potential there. I think the Comcast, I forgot who it was, but Comcast said that with the addition of Epic Universe, it makes the entire Universal property, all 3 parks and Volcano Bay, a 1-week-long vacation, right? And I think Disney's looking at that going, okay, well, we have a resort here in California that has 2 parks. We have the ability now to build 3. Okay, so let's see if we can kind of mimic the success of what we think will happen over there in Florida with Universal and kind of bring that here to California. It's very similar, and even with the layout, like the logistics of what have you with Epic Universe and how you have to take a bus to the 3rd park, it's likely that that the 3rd park, wherever they decide to put it at Disneyland Resort, will likely be separate from the other 2. It won't be like a walkable. It'll probably be, like you said, George, in monorail, people mover, whatever it is, right? So they're looking at that. I think Disney's really looking at Universal going, okay, if it works for them, we can do that here in Anaheim, and I think there's more growth potential out here in Anaheim. I've been saying that for the longest time. Disney World right now is already a week-plus vacation. You have 4 parks, 2 water parks. It's a huge thing. It's a huge undertaking for the average family. You add a 5th park to Walt Disney World, and you start to cannibalize yourself quite a bit. You add a 3rd park to Disneyland Resort, and I think there's a lot more growth potential there with the hotel occupancy and what have you. And I think that's why there's a bigger push from Disney, like you said, Slimer, like with this Disneyland Forward thing and putting money into it and investing all this political cachet into the city of Anaheim. There's a reason for that. They see way more growth potential, not physical growth, financial growth, So I think it'll be fascinating. We'll see how it pans out. But I don't know. I mean, I want to ask you guys too, with this article, they mention here, let me see here. Give me 1 second. Okay, so the headliner here says, in a presentation to investors, the company says it plans to, quote, explore even more characters and franchises, including some that haven't been leveraged extensively to date, What do you think that is? IP that hasn't been leveraged extensively to date. Where is Disney going with it?
Yeah, can I throw a couple at you?
Do it, man. Do it. Let's go.
Disney fans have been complaining for the longest time that they haven't been getting enough classic IPs into the parks.
Right.
Okay. They're always going after, hey, what's new, what's modern, what's the highest rated show on Disney Plus right now? Which one of the IPs are kicking butt? Well, for us old Disney fans, okay, I mean, I've been going to the park since 1982. All right. Why isn't Jungle Book? Why isn't Baloo in Animal Kingdom in any way?
Right.
In any way, in any capacity. I mean, how about you guys throw some homage to an old IP like Jungle Book? How about Robin Hood? I mean, there's just so many IPs that they can go back and reach back to and introduce into the park. And while they might not be the biggest ride or the biggest e-ticket attraction, Disney World isn't all about e-ticket attractions. I mean, let's not forget that Disneyland was actually established as a place that people could go to ride family-friendly rides and see family-friendly attractions. And that doesn't always require a $500 billion ride. It could be a small Jungle Book ride for kids. I think Animal Kingdom is sorely lacking those kinds of attractions, just to keep the people moving and to keep just to keep the ebb and flow of the population within the park away from the e-ticket attractions. Because if you look at the lines any given day, and I'm picking on Animal Kingdom for a specific reason, is because when it comes to population control, it's the one that suffered the most because it has the least amount of attractions to offer, whether it be e-ticket or D-ticket. So I think that's a really valid point. What do you guys think?
I'm going to expand on that a little bit more, what you were saying, Slimer, because I know this was part of an argument when they were talking about the Beyond Big Thunder. And, they mentioned Coco. Obviously, Coco is a more updated, more relevant film. So is Encanto. Then when Damaro mentioned about the villains, which obviously the whole arena erupted and went nuts. I mean, come on. That should have gave them their answer right there. But there was it created a debate online where people saying, okay, are they really going to do the villains? How relevant are the villains? Because when you go all the way back, you can take the evil queen from Snow White. You could take Ursula from The Little Mermaid. You can take even Chernabog from Fantasia. Those are all old classic original Disney films of old classic Disney villains. But I think that's also what they could be partaking into, that not necessarily the films themselves, but the actual individual characters, as they had mentioned in the article as well. Because I feel like even when they have the Halloween parties, more so at Disneyland with Oogie Boogie Bash, it's all about the Disney villains, where when you go through the treat trails, you see a Disney villain. While they added Judge Doom from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and they added, I believe it was either last year or the year before, Madame Mim from The Sword and the Stone, which automatically, when you think of those characters, it's how relevant really are they? But I mean, when you have these guests that are paying this premium price ticket to see these characters, they're more popular than a lot of people really think. It's just putting them in the spotlight and giving the guests that notion to have that experience.
And George,
go ahead, sir.
Well, I just want to say real quick, and to your point, Slimer, and George too. George just said, okay, these classic movies are more popular than they assume, right? He's right. And to your point, Slimer, like you mentioned Jungle Book, for example, right? The entire live action kind of model formula is based on kind of pulling money out of these really popular franchises, right? So we had a movie, a live action version of the Jungle Book a few years ago. Actually, it's been almost a decade ago. I can't even believe it now. Yeah. In 2016, the Jungle Book, which I absolutely loved. Jon Favreau absolutely crushed it. That was a great movie. I loved it. Look at the worldwide. This movie hit almost $1 billion in the worldwide box office. So to your credit, Slimer, Jungle Book is big money, Disney. Tap into that classic stuff. You're doing it with your live action movies, and for the most part, it's been successful. There's been a few hit or misses, whatever, but for the most part, you guys have been crushing it with these live actions. So why don't you do that in the parks? Why don't you bring the Jungle Book something or dark ride, whatever, into Animal Kingdom, like Slimer says. I think it might look. There's obviously a hunger for these classic properties, and they're doing well. Like embrace it. But go ahead, Slimer. I do apologize, my man.
No, you're fine, man. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, almost $1 billion, and that was a time when the dollar actually bought a lot more. So I'm pretty sure that the margins are a lot better than a lot of the IP, the live action remakes that are coming out today. This is 10 years ago.
Right.
But there's a lot of smaller ideas and smaller investments that Disney has been doing lately. They're yielding them bigger return on investments, such as Oga's Cantina. Okay, they had just announced that they're going to redo Tortuga's Tavern, and these are small investments that just generate so much profit. I mean, when you go to Oga's Cantina, if you're going with two friends, your bill's $70 minimum. How about this? How about a pirate bar where Jack Sparrow and Blackbeard are in there? You theme it, 1970s tavern, and it's a highly themed, immersive experience, just like Oga's Cantina, but revolved around pirates. I mean, how many of us, right, have been crying for some kind of an adult location that we can go to into the Magic Kingdom to just have a couple good beers without having to make a reservation. Now, if we had to make a reservation because it's extremely popular, okay, I'm fine with that as long as the experience matches the time it takes me to make the reservation. I was talking to my friend that I like to go to the parks with, but like, let's say Gaston's, what is it called? What is that?
LeFou's Brew.
LeFou's Brew, right?
Yeah.
What a wasted opportunity. What if it was Gaston's Brew, right? And they served, and he brought up a good point. What if they served wild food, like wild boar?
Oh, that's interesting.
Make it a hunters themed restaurant where you get food that hunters get, and this is food caught by Gaston, for example.
Right.
LeFou's in there, he's entertaining guests. Gaston's in there entertaining guests, and George, that would connect to the Villain Land that they would plan on putting right behind Haunted Mansion. So these individual characters, while they don't need individual rides, there's a lot of highly themed eating and dining experiences that Disney's getting really good with, which would yield a ton of money and would be extremely popular with fans that are just ready to throw down their wallets just to have a unique dining experience. And Haunted Mansion, I mean, that's like the number one on the list right there. But those are just a couple of examples that they can tap into and have minimal investment, but it's just going to be an experience you go back to again and again and again.
Oh, dude, they would print money with stuff like that. And even like at Disneyland here, the Golden Horseshoe, right? Like, okay, so George, we went to Walt Disney World back in July, right? Mm-hmm. And we were lucky enough to get the Hoop-de-Doo review reservation or whatever, right? So we did the Hoop-de-Doo, and I fell in love with the Hoop-de-Doo. It's like the Golden Horseshoe on steroids, okay?
Yeah.
Right, it's amazing. It's absolutely incredible. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
And I'm so glad to hear that because I had to give up one of my kidneys to get one of those reservations.
Hey, you know what? It was worth it, dude. It was worth every kidney that you gave up. Okay, I promise you that. It was fantastic. But here's the thing: when I was sitting there watching Hoop-de-Doo, right, and they serve bottomless beers there, which is out of control, dude. Well, Disney World, you're a maniac, I tell you. But here's the thing. I'm looking at that going, okay, this place is making bank. Disneyland is sitting here with the Golden Horse review, which is a really fun atmosphere. They don't serve alcohol there. And I'm like, and I know Disneyland is expanding their alcohol kind of footprint, which to me it was kind of stupid anyway, because it was like Club 33 was serving alcohol for years and years and years. So Disneyland hasn't really been a dry park in a really long time. But like the floodgates kind of opened with Oga's Cantina, and now they're expanding that into a few other locations. But imagine if you had the same, like if you were to serve alcohol, like say at Golden Horseshoe. I mean, it's like you mentioned, Slimer, like, with the pirate thing, it adds to the theming kind of, right? The alcohol, it adds to that energy. I think the same thing with the Golden Horseshoe. You add beer and alcohol to that equation, and that's a ruckus, really good time. And it really does feel like it fits. Like when you insert alcohol into that equation, obviously within reason, okay, I'm not trying to get too crazy here, but like I think it adds to that theming, like the pirate thing, right? Where it's like, oh, it's a bunch of like, It's a very like, Western kind of vibe. People are like, it's a saloon kind of thing. You're drinking beer,
Yeah.
you're having fun. It adds to it. They would make a mint on that, So you're right.
Yeah.
There's little things they can do that can increase that money. And it doesn't always have to be $1 billion ride or $1 billion land.
No, not at all. I mean, hey, I got an opportunity to sing Yo Ho, Yo Ho, A Pirate's Life for Me while slamming a couple back with Blackbeard and some of the other pirates from the IP. I mean, it's
I'm
a slam
sold.
dunk idea.
I'm sold.
And I'm all for better food and more food at the Disney parks, guys. I mean, that I don't waste my money on gifts. I waste it at the restaurants,
right?
And the drinks.
No, 100%, 100%. Yeah, no, absolutely, man, absolutely. And they are at Destination D. They did announce a pirate lounge for Magic Kingdom, so we'll see. I don't know the details really. I gotta look into it, man. But like I don't know if they're gonna serve drinks or what have you. It would be a huge missed opportunity if they don't serve drinks in a pirate lounge. How do you not serve drinks in a pirate lounge? Disney, if you don't do that, I don't know what's going on.
I mean, are we going on an adventure or not?
Come on. Let's do it here.
Yeah, we're not doing the Disney Junior version of Jake and the Neverland Pirates. Like we want we want Pirates of the Caribbean, like that classic,
Yeah.
We wants the rum.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now I want to ask you guys one final thing before we head out, okay? Because this is interesting. Because there's the Daddy Josh equation here, right? So a lot of fans are kind of frustrated. D23 Expo, it's a lot of what if, maybe, possibly stuff, and then we get Destination D23, which is there was a lot of that too. Like maybe we'll do this, maybe we'll do that, and then even with his $60 billion announcement, Josh was like, maybe Wakanda, right? So a lot of this like kind of blue sky stuff, right? So it's like, I'll start with you, Slimer. What do you think about this? Like, what is the rationale behind Demaro kind of throwing out these kind of possibilities without really giving us like look, for example, right? Like as much as like Chapek really shit the bed in a lot of ways, he absolutely did. When he was a parks chief, there was a lot of stuff going on there that was not great. But with Chapek though, when he announced something, it ended up happening, right? Like it was a green. Like when he said Cosmic Rewind, it happened. When he said more Marvel in DCA, it happened, right? So we got greenlit stuff announced, and it happened. With Josh, it feels a lot more like a brainstorm session with fans, right? Like, what do you think Slimer is behind that? Is that a Josh thing? Is he afraid to commit to these big projects and he wants to like focus group it? Or is it an Iger thing? Maybe Iger's telling him like, hey, you know what? We don't got the money, maybe hold them off. Where you kind of stand with it? What's your theory?
Yeah, I think that's Josh's approach to business consumer relationship. I think it's a couple of things, actually. I think that's one of them. So Josh Damaro's approach to business consumer relationship is he likes to have an open dialogue, hoping that, you guys will accept the fact that maybe these are things that are going to happen, or maybe these are things that are not. And that the majority of the people are going to be okay with whatever the outcome is. And he believes, and he has a little bit more of an informal relationship. And you can kind of tell that by the way he interacts with guests, right? He's very informal. He's, hey, how's it going? I think he even goes up to Tom Corliss and asks them how the parks are doing from time to time.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So he's very informal. So I think there's a little bit of informality there. Could it be also to keep, to keep us in front of the TV, metaphorically speaking? I think it's a little bit of that too. We always keep our ears to the ground we're always watching the television, waiting for that next announcement, whether it happens or not. That's part of the intrigue. I mean, look, We're here talking about whether it's going to happen or not. So obviously we're interested in it, right?
Sure. I mean, it's working, right? It's working. We're all here talking about it, and everyone's talking about it. So
yes. So whether it happens or not, we're talking about it, and there's gossip. And Josh knows that. He's sitting back. He's looking at, hey, they're talking about it. I don't know what's going to happen, but at least the internet is blabbering their mouths about it. At least it's on Twitter and it's on YouTube. Whether how much of that is investor confidence, letting investors know, hey, we got all these ideas in the chute. We're looking at another strong 10 years, because we have these ideas, and trust us, guys, we're working. I think it's a little bit of all those factors. Wow, what do you think, George?
Yeah, I like to think of Josh D'Amaro as Common Core math. It's like you can't like get from like point A to point B where you have to do an in between of point A to point B to get point C. When you already know what the answer is of C, just go from A to C where you have to do B.
Right.
And it's like why?
Yeah.
But and that's the thing.
Yeah.
As a person, I'm for sure he's a good guy. You know, as you know,
Absolutely.
he's a very
I
he's
would
a
love to
people
have a
person.
I would love to have a beer with him at Golden Horseshoe. Let me just say that.
There-
Okay,
There you
George,
go.
and if let's go and look at the competitor across the street though, and let's look at their business consumer relationship. Theirs is very matter of fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
hey, these are the 10 houses that are going to happen at Halloween Horror Nights this year, and they don't make an announcement until it's until the house is already done being built. And they don't have any other communication other than the announcement. Like they don't have a public figurehead. There's nobody that represents public relations the way that Josh D'Amaro does. Who's
Sure.
the face of Universal? It's the minions. They let all their IP do. They let all their IP do all the talking, and their announcements are how they connect with their consumers, and they like that because it's very straightforward. Hey, when I get a ticket to Halloween Horror Nights this year, this is what I expect. And by the way, I mean, Halloween Horror Nights, it's insane. I went for 10 years, and I had to stop going simply because it's unbelievably expensive and it's grossly oversold. So
Wow.
that could be moving to
Well-
Epic Universe in the future. Who knows?
Well, and you touched upon a great point, Slimer, when you had mentioned like no one knows the face of Universal. They don't have like a headliner making these announcements. It's just Universal making, hey, breaking news. We're getting this at this time. Where
Right.
actually there was a certain point where, I mean, aside from like Eisner and Wells, we knew who they were as a CEO, but no one really knew like who was in the pipeline as far as like down below them, and it was like as time went on with Jay Rasulo and then Tom Staggs, and it's like that was the era where people were starting to say, okay, this is the guy who is running the parks and doing this. And then I think when D23 came out, in 2009, that's when everything started coming up because these people were at these presentations saying, hey, I'm so and so, I do this for Disney and I do that. And I think that's where they started to become more of a public figure in the Disney community. So, and I think like as time goes on with these presentations and these events, it's like we get to know more of these people, and then we get to know the Imagineers and the animators and what have you, and everyone that's part of these projects. But I still double down that I still feel like, and as I said, I have hope. I might be eating these words, but it's like because Josh D'Amaro has like really disappointed us like time in and time out again. But it's like I still feel like the next expo, and I feel like this is probably going to be it for me. Like if there's nothing big coming out of this next expo, it's like, okay, then I really can't take anything face value of what you're saying, Josh, as chairman of parks, because as I said, you're now going to be putting these Disney guests who are paying a ticket to now be moved into a bigger facility where everybody's at once, and you have to deliver something. Because if you are anticipating on having more people that wants to get into these presentations and not deliver, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to look good on his image. And we all know even Iger's image, and that's going to stem back to him, because even though Josh is chairman, Iger is CEO. And he's all about his image. He's all about, leaving the company on a high note. And I feel like where even now Iger is kind of stumbling of not really knowing how much damage was done when he left it to Chapek.
Well, and here's the thing, George. You bring up a good point. And now that they announced a $60 billion investment, I think
these fans are going to hold them to it.
Yes. Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like the next expo is what, like in 2024, right?
2024.
Okay. I think fans are going to be like, you know what? We need to hear something. Like we need something here, guys. We need something. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully they come through. I as a fan, I really hope they come through, and we'll see. I think Josh is the last two expos, Destination D and D23, it was very like what we talked about, Slimer, very informal. What if this is what we're thinking about? What do you guys think? Okay, cool. The next one though, I think it's time to actually show us what we're doing here, and kind of like solidify something, So we'll see. And like you said, George, it's moving into a bigger stadium, all that. So they there's this expectation now where it's like, yeah, you should deliver.
Yeah, I mean, like, if we don't get anything, I think we're probably all going to be sporting the Josh DeMar Go.
DeMar Go, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Now, actually, before we go, I want to ask you something. What do you think of, like, this whole? We talked about Epic Universe and the whole thing. What do you think asking to do? Like, what do you think? Like, I made it very clear in like a lot of my videos. Like, a lot of fans are like, "Oh, this is just going to like destroy the Walt Disney Company, right? Like, it's going to Disney World's done, right?" I'm very skeptical on that. Like, look, I don't think it's going to be a failure in and of itself. I think the park itself will be very busy. I just think it's not going to be the all around home run that people think it will be. I think there will be some cannibalization there with the studio park, which is very weak compared to Island Adventure, and will probably be very weak also in compared to Epic Universe. I think there's going to be some issues here with that. Disney doesn't seem to be super worried. What do you think? Is this going to come in and be a wrecking ball for Disney World? Is it going to come in and help Walt Disney World? Where do you stand with it?
I think Epic Universe has a lot of good ideas and some not great ideas. Let me give an example. So I think we can all agree that the Nintendo Land, which by the way is going to be a full-fledged Nintendo Land, by the way, they're going to have Donkey Kong, the Donkey Kong ride, which does not exist on the West Coast. So we are going to get a bigger Nintendo Land. So I do believe that that's going to be a great success. Universal Monsters, it's a niche idea. I love Universal Monsters. I love it. October is my favorite month. I love celebrating Halloween. And even I will tell you that depending on how that land is created, I mean, it's got to have some Joe Rohde level theming. Like, it can't seem like something that was just popped up for the Halloween season. And, how many people are going to travel across the country to go experience a Universal Monsters land? I don't know. I mean, it's 100. This is a land based off of 100-year-old movies. Now one can argue, well, everything at Disney World is 100 years old, right? But we're talking about a very niche IP from Universal Studios. And then How to Train Your Dragon. That's kind of 50-50. Obviously, market analysis has done the research, but they're trying to appease everybody, and they're trying to appease no one at the same time. I think the hotel looks like it might have some promise. I think aesthetically, people are going to go there just to see what it's like. But the second and third time returns are really going to dictate how popular that park is.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think this park has an IP problem. Aside from Nintendo, right? Nintendo is like I agree with you. That's an automatic home run. But even Harry Potter, this is now on a theme park level. Harry Potter, this is the third go at this. Like, the novelty starts to wear off after a while. This is the third Harry Potter land.
Or
on top.
OG, did you know that the Lost Continent is going to be expanded into the Harry Potter land that's just north of it?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So they're not making that Zelda.
No, they're going to expand the Harry Potter land, and the reason is and OG, have you ever been to Islands Adventure?
I have not. No.
George, you have, right?
Mm-hmm, I have.
So you know how ridiculously crowded it gets up there, and they need to release that crowd because it's shoulder to shoulder right outside of Hagrid's.
Hagrid's is like a bottleneck.
It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous bottleneck. So they're going to have to release that population, and they're going to go with the expansion of the Harry Potter land. So, yeah, I think 4 times is I think the fans have had their fill.
Yeah, it loses its novelty, number one, on a theme park level. And then even the IP itself is sort of dying on the vine, which is why David Zaslav is announcing like the reboot as a series. Yeah. Like, you don't reboot something because it's so successful. You usually reboot because you need to inject some life back into the franchise. So that's, on the struggle bus quite a little bit. Like you said, How to Train Your Dragon. yeah, I like the movies, but like, how relevant is it? Are kids talking about that right now? Not really.
No, no.
You know, there's just a lot of question marks here. And I think a lot of fans are sort of, I think there's a hunger out there amongst Disney fans to sort of like put a fire under Disney's ass, right? And that's fine. And I actually, I fully support that. Like, I think that is good to kind of keep the pressure on Disney to do better, do better, do better, do better.
Right.
But I think in that quest to sort of motivate Disney, I think a lot of fans sort of over exaggerate or kind of turn a blind eye to some of the issues that Universal has, because it's like, well, this is the engine we're going to use to motivate Disney, right? So it's like, so we just have to like support it at all costs. Well, it's like, come on, like there's issues here with this park. Like we have to acknowledge that. I know that we're trying to get Disney motivated, but at the same time, we can't like be blind to the fact that this park has an IP problem. Like you said, Slimer, the monsters thing, look, yeah, they're 100-year-old movies. And Universal, the last few goes at these movies in theaters did not do well. They completely ditched their Dark Universe, cinematic, whatever. They completely ditched it because the movies were not doing well. And now you're going to go in there and be like, okay, we're going to do a whole land on it. And hey, maybe that's great for like Halloween, but is it going to keep people there all year? We just don't know. Is it something that's going to motivate people to travel to Central Florida to go to?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and you okay, Slimer.
Is it a year-long attraction? Not only that, but Disney still has the superhero IPs. If they want to neutralize that, all they have to do is build a Jabba the Hutt restaurant that's in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. So the entrance is just like Jabba's palace. You go in, there's Jabba. It's an animatronic. You have Twi'leks. You have tables. It's table service. Han Solo's carbonite on the wall. I mean, you have an alien music band in the background, and then you have a shop at the exit that sells you, Return of the Jedi, gangster merchandise. I mean, you guys don't. I mean, think about that. A Jabba's Palace restaurant.
Oh yeah, dude. Well, I'm telling you, that'd be incredible, man. That'd be incredible. And Universal Hollywood had, and I think it was Dracula's Castle or something. I don't really remember the details, but when you walked into Universal Hollywood, they had a permanent like a Halloween kind of maze or something. In the comment section, please. I'm not a huge Universal expert. Comment down below with the name of it. I forgot the name, but it was in the entryway for Hollywood, for Universal Hollywood, and it was a year-round Halloween thing. Mm-hmm. It didn't do well. That's why it's gone now. So I mean,
and to kind of go back to what you were saying, OG, about like the differences between Disney and Universal. There was people when they made the announcement for the new land at Animal Kingdom, where it's like, okay, but you're going to have Encanto, and then it's going to fuse into Indiana Jones. How could Disney do that? Like, how does that mix, together? Which we even question it, But then if you also look at the other side of the spectrum, you're going to walk into How to Train Your Dragon, and then it's going to infuse the Harry Potter. So, like, how does that even work? So it's like, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. It's like, if people are going to question the fact of selecting random IPs at Disney, while Universal's doing the same thing, because literally they're picking IPs, and it's like, okay, we'll put in Universal Monsters, How to Train Your Dragon, Harry Potter, Nintendo, boom, there's our new park. There's no co-aesthetic flow between them where it's like one transitions into the other. And again, the same thing goes with Disney. Same thing with Toy Story Land that moves into Galaxy's Edge. I would have loved to have seen a giant, and I said this before, like a giant Darth Vader action figure that's like brand new, pristine in the box, that's like human size, and then that shows you the way of saying, okay, you're leaving Toy Story Land and you're about to enter into Galaxy's Edge. That would have been more copacetic. But people then take the fact of, they're so quick to bash Disney on those key little decision making, but they don't look at the bigger picture for Universal, because Universal's doing the exact same thing.
Well, it's Ride the Movies, but here's a video game franchise, right? I know now it's a movie, but it wasn't, So it's like that's kind of thing, right? If that was a Disney park, I think that they would be a lot more picky, right? You ride the movies, but why is there a video game thing in here? That's not a movie, right? But yeah, there is a lot of that, So it's interesting. So we'll see how it affects the industry, man. I think it's going to be with Epic Universe, my prediction for it is I think it's going to be successful as a park. I do think, though, and I've said this many times on the channel, I think it's going to cannibalize some of those Universal parks. It's not going to be the all-encompassing home run that people think it's going to be, and that's fine. I do know that Disney actually had a lot of cannibalization when they built Animal Kingdom. I know it kind of pulled away a lot from Hollywood Studios, or at the time it was Disney MGM, right? But so I think that some of that will come here. But at the end of the day, I mean, look, I think it'll be a fun place. I think it'll do well in and of itself. I just don't think it'll be the Disney World killer that a lot of people are expecting it to be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you, and the return visits are really going to dictate how popular it is and word of mouth, really. And you're always going to have rides that are going to be replaced because they end up being duds. The marketing team, they were wrong. And some things are going to be changed almost, within 2 to 3 years of the park opening. So that's going to be, that's going to have a lot of moving parts within the first 3 years until they finally decide, hey, this is what we want to stick with for the short term.
Yeah. 100%. Slimer, it was an absolute honor having you on, brother. We will have you on again for sure. If you're down to come on again, man, you are definitely welcome back.
Oh, yeah, I'll definitely be back, guys.
Absolutely. Slimer, he doesn't have any social media, but check him out in the live chat for our live shows, in our premieres. Slimer is a regular on the channel. We love Slimer. Slimer, you're always welcome back. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us today.
Thank you, guys. Pleasure talking to you guys. I look forward to talking to you guys soon. And hey, George, 5 o'clock Shadow Face Off, man. We're going to have to shave on the same day. Do a 3-day check, 5-day check, see who's got a beard the fastest.
Oh, I'll definitely take you on that challenge, because this is about 3 days.
Yeah, I know.
Tell you, man, that's pretty cool, man. We should actually maybe we could do a video on that. The 5 o'clock challenge. That's awesome, dude. George, if you could let everybody at home know where they can find you and your beard on social media, sir.
Absolutely. You can find me on X at Disney George. You could also find me on the podcast A Walk with Walt. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info. And definitely look out for that beard face-off challenge, and hopefully maybe we could get sponsored by Manscaped.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll work on that for sure. Send them an email. Thank you all so much for watching. Comment down below with all your thoughts on everything we discussed today. The $60 billion investment coming to Disney parks, Epic Universe, all that good stuff. Again, thank you, Slimer, for coming on. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye, everybody.